Thank you Setup for sponsoring today's video. If you guys want my recommendation, honestly, I think the best thing you can do is to get an SSD and back up your MacBooks with it. It'll save you so much freaking time, and that's exactly what I keep doing with like my programming units. Like right now I'm transferring everything from the MacBook Air to the MacBook Pro again for like a second run. Honestly, the main reason for that is just because I spent like the whole week last week trying to like refactor some tools, benchmark things, coding here and there to make sure everything works properly for this review, because it took a lot of time for me to refactor some code. And yeah, anyways, I think you guys are going to enjoy this review. I have to refinish resetting everything up so I can have a clean install and do a proper video, which means I guess I'll see you guys tomorrow because I have a lot of work ahead. Yo, there's nothing like staying home for a whole day and know that all you're gonna do today is just code, but like for fun. Taking a day off to work on personal projects is awesome. I'm a developer by trade, although not anymore. Actually, I just develop to either keep up with current trends, learn new technologies, or just for YouTube. For the past year, I've been slowly getting back into iOS development, which means my Premiere machine needs to be Mac-based. Recently, I've been mostly using my M2 Mac Mini as my primary development machine, but at the office and on the go, I use my M2 MacBook Air 13-inch for the most part. Although recently, with the release of the M3 MacBook Pro, it was somewhat enticing for the channel and for me to give this machine a try. So with it, have been coding some projects and testing my new Linux server at the office. With the 13-inch MacBook Pro Touch Bar gone and replaced by this new M3 MacBook Pro, I've been thinking, could this be the ultimate machine for developers? I'm about to dig into some nerdy, important stuff, so just hear me out. The finest thing about M3 really boils down to a couple of things. Apple shrinking the die to a 3nm process and a new GPU architecture that features dynamic caching. At the end of the day, like every year, this stuff sets new benchmarks in performance and efficiency for the Macs. The process really allows for components in the SoC like... By the way, SoC just means system on chip. Just thought I would let you know. Like the 16-core neural engine to be more efficient at executing machine learning and AI tasks. It also allows for unified memory to be more efficient in memory bandwidth utilization, and because M3 is more efficient than M2, it allows for greater power delivery at zero cost when it comes to power consumption. This means that battery life across the board stays the same. This stuff for web developers is great. It's practically way more performance than you'll ever need, but like many developers, many of us enjoy learning new things. We like dipping our toes into learning new technologies while still making sure our MacBooks can run our everyday workflows. Just to give you an example, I'm mainly a web developer. I love playing with different web dev stacks, but now I'm becoming more of an avid iOS developer. I've been spending quite some time properly learning about iOS development, whether I'm learning about programmatic views, memory management, Swift UI, model view controller implementations, and all that fuzz. What matters for me is to have a machine that can easily handle web development, iOS development, and the ability to keep trying out new technologies. The M3 for me has easily been able to do all of that. Its resources can easily handle Xcode without a problem. Like, my whole development workflow is always smooth regardless of whether or not I have 10 Chrome tabs open, the terminal open handling Git, and of course my editor still spitting IntelliSense suggestions as I code. So that's my story as a developer? Well, not totally. You see, 2 weeks ago I decided to build a dedicated Linux server. So before messing with that, I decided it was probably best to mess with a VPS to properly build my own custom server. I rented a Linode VPS to test on, SSH'd into it, spent tons of hours on Chrome figuring out my setup, the tools I needed, how my server was going to handle my entire studio workflow. Anyways, that's besides the point. The important thing is that I had no issues at all dealing with a VPS, nor installing all the tools I needed to develop a structure for the remote server I wanted to create. Heck, I even went as far as using Docker on that VPS to install Homer as a full static dashboard for the server. Oh yes, Docker. Docker with an 8GB machine is not always going to cut it, chief. Look, I will say I'm not the biggest Docker user, but I've realized that Docker can be RAM intensive when doing tutorials. Just to give you guys an example, if you spin up a multi-container application, say something like WordPress with two main components like a frontend and a MySQL database, by using a quick Docker compose file, you'll see how much RAM your engine will start eating. I know these can be most Docker workflows out there, but once you start opening Chrome tabs, IDEs, an iOS emulator on top of that, memory pressure will increase and things can start lagging. So if you are the type of dev that works a lot with Docker, I would probably look into getting 16GB of RAM. Now that's my story when it comes to the M3 regarding my own real world experiences, but for this video, I wanted more. I wanted to really put this laptop through its paces in other aspects, not just my own development experience. So I went out of my way to download and slightly recode some coding benchmarks. I wanted to test most of the components composing the SoC. That's why yesterday I had to clean up and reset my entire development workflow because the testing last week was a mess, but a success. So here's what happened. My goal with this base model M3 that delivers an 8-core CPU with a 10-core GPU and, like I mentioned, 8GB of RAM was to put it through its paces. The cool part is that unlike the old M2 13-inch MacBook Pro, out of the box this now gets 512GB of storage. 512GB of storage with 2 NAND chips, essentially making swap memory a lot faster when memory pressure starts to demand from storage. Like if you were to execute the Docker Compose example I showed you on something like the MacBook Air with the same RAM and 256GB of storage, the same workload on the M3 MacBook Pro will feel faster, and I'll get into all of that in a minute. Really, aside from the SoC in terms of hardware, I think this new Pro might just be better than the Air. Like in terms of display, it beats it. You get a 14.2-inch mini LED backlit liquid retina XDR display, which comes with its perks like SDR brightness at 600 nits and ProMotion technology delivering refresh rates up to 120Hz. And you might not be the type of person to overthink this, but at those rates, have you ever realized that text feels a lot easier to read as you scroll down? Like reading mid-scroll feels effortless. Motion clarity. Optimum Tech made me realize that in his latest iPhone video. Anyways, look, I think this here is practically the next M3 MacBook Air in a MacBook Pro chassis. You get a fan for better thermals, allowing the MacBook to push past thermal throttle points the Air wouldn't. You also get a 22-hour battery life, a 1080p webcam, Bluetooth 5.3 for stable wireless connections with your peripherals, great speakers, and a complete set of IOs like HDMI and a SDXC card slot. The only thing that throws me off is that M3 is only able to provide connectivity to a single monitor. I think that could have killed MacBook Air sales. As a whole, really, comparing both, the only good part about the Air is the weight, in my opinion. Your opinion might differ from mine, so really feel free to leave your thoughts. I also wouldn't say the Pro's keyboard is better per se. Don't get me wrong, having the keyboard surrounded by a black anodized aluminum inset is nice, but it doesn't feel like it changes my typing experience one bit. The trackpad does feel a bit sharper on the Air, and the clicks definitely sound different. The only reason that I could think of is simply because of the difference in thickness regarding both bodies where the trackpads rest on. Obviously, coming from the 13-inch MacBook Pro, I mean, totally different experience. Like, we don't even have the touch bar anymore. The design language on that machine is totally outdated. The bezels are thicker. It doesn't feel as robust in my opinion, but this This to me as a whole could just be the best laptop for developers at the moment. The bulkiness just only adds confidence, the M3 not offering space black saves you some cleaning, and the fan really is a total game changer on a development machine. And so this is where I show you all the testings I've done. So let's jump into the first component, the RAM. For me personally, when it comes to my personal development machine, the first thing that goes down is SSD. My Mac Mini has been a great example for that. SSD gets full, then when memory pressure goes up and RAM starts to dip into it, there's no more memory left for the SSD to allocate to the RAM. So performance then goes to the garbage. You can literally see how the disk gets fuller and fuller because of the RAM. With my M2 Mac Mini, at boot you get a memory usage of around 5 gigabytes. If I open 15 Chrome tabs, that jumps to around 6.80 gigabytes. And with my own iOS development workflow, including my emulator running, I get around 7 gigabytes with 2 gigabytes of swapped memory. On the M3, these numbers don't differ too much. However, because my storage is larger and I'm running 2 NAND chips on this machine, swapped memory performance will be greater. One thing is for sure though, this doesn't entail the full picture. You see, on a 32 gigabyte machine with 15 Chrome tabs opened, RAM usage will seem to be like it's so much more of a burden. But really, it's not. Why? I really need you guys to bear with me right here because this is the coolest part. macOS maximizes its use of RAM to its fullest capacity. That's why if you run the same Chrome setup on a 32 gigabyte machine, you'll see how the OS loves to load stuff on its memory. At school in computer hardware, the very first thing they teach you is that unused RAM is wasted RAM. Why is that? Well, because if it's unused, it's not really doing anything for you. That's why macOS loves preloading apps and keeping older data to allow the machine to work faster. That along cached files really allows for more RAM to deliver better performance. Now, when you have little RAM like 8 gigabytes, this is where Apple Silicon's memory management becomes super powerful in my opinion, and this is when memory and storage starts to matter the most. Intelligently, the OS compartmentalizes what resources need memory the most, and if ever memory pressure gets clogged, it starts swapping it with storage. For example, running both of my iOS workflows on my Mac Mini and my M3 MacBook Pro totally yields different results in performance. Why? Well, not only do I have more room in my SSD to swap memory with, but I also have 2 NAND chips making data flow faster. So as memory pressure starts to increase because of me opening Notion, maybe using a second terminal to get import to one of my projects and opening it up on VS Code, talking to people on Discord and so on, you'll eventually realize how quickly the same specs the M2 base model Air has in the M2 Mini will drop in performance. Plus, with the Air having no fans, you might sometimes run into thermal throttling issues before memory management even fails on you. What I'm trying to get at is that in terms of base models, the new M3 MacBook Pro for development seems to be more of a well-rounded machine compared to the Air. A computer like this is easily meant to be docked on a setup. You've got all the ports you need. Bluetooth 5.3 really helps improve connection stability with your devices. It can easily handle my audio setup, and its display is easily able to keep up as a second monitor with a main 4K monitor that can output 120Hz as well. It's all about having the smoothest transition when it comes to docking this onto a setup. With this, my development setup also not only includes apps like Xcode and Docker, or command line applications like Conda and AZTop, but it also includes apps like NotePlan, Expenses, and Hookmark. Apps that allow my entire workflow to come together, especially this holiday season where I've spent quite a lot of time shopping around. For those who are trying to keep up with work and shopping for the holidays, I'd figure I'd put together 5 of the coolest apps you can install on your development MacBooks. The first one is BusyCall. This not only is a calendar, but it's an organizer that's able to create conference calls out of the box, supports rich text along sticky notes and journal entries, although for more detailed notes you can pair it with NotePlan. With NotePlan, you can easily plan out your days and create advanced to-do lists to dictate your days. The cool thing is that by using Hookmark, instead of loading and placing links directly into your lists, you can create bi-directional bookmarks that allow you to go back and forward from your to-do list to the webpage of the items you wish to shop for. And if you really want to keep up with your spending, expenses can easily do that for you. I think it's kinda important to keep track of your finances within this holiday season. Setapp really is able to deliver all these apps and more with their subscription. It's a curated collection of apps, a smart way to get all the apps you want within the platform by paying a fixed price once a month. Hopefully this workflow can help some of you. You can check them out down below if you are interested. Morning, guys. Okay, so today is the day we get to test the last two components I've been wanting to test, the GPU and the A&E. Anyways, look, turns out that both of these components are pretty good at handling linear algebra. More than anything, handling matrices, the A&E more than the GPU, but anyways. The whole point now is that Apple built a neural engine in a consumer-oriented product. That's not like the most normal thing to do, to be honest. Like if you have a Tesla, your car has one of those. Basically what Apple wanted was to run models on low-powered processors in real time. Not necessarily train them, but rather run pre-trained models on its chip. And for the longest time, I was so confused about why this was so groundbreaking until I recently figured it out. Let me present to you Siri, a pre-trained model that now runs more intelligently on the A&E. In the past, older systems would take something like a Siri-related query, where this voice data would get pre-processed, then uploaded to a cloud with massive computing cluster capabilities. It would then get decoded with the help of a speech analysis model, and then you would get some results from the cloud. That's way too many steps. Yeah, but now with Apple's neural engine, the chip can process Siri-related queries better thanks to its natural language model to do the analysis itself and deliver the result. And when you end up combining the A&E with their GPU, Apple's silicon can really go through several large and complex machine learning models. This is where I found YOLO, an object detection model. Predictive models like YOLO allows you to classify data, like analyzing different types of classes within a frame. So because I wanted to benchmark this laptop and compare the evolution of the A&E between the Air and the Pro, I decided to write some code that would allow me to detect the cars outside of my window. This allowed me to analyze the speed at which the CPU, GPU, and A&E would process the image. All of it worked except when it came to spitting numbers for the A&E. Well, at least that's what Azitop was telling me. During my benchmarks and testing, the A&E never saw any types of load. Whether I was doing the object detection with the CPU or the GPU, I never saw the A&E utilization move one bit. So I ended up texting Alex, who pointed me out to the right direction. In order to use the A&E, the machine needed an API that would help it understand this third-party model. I ended up downloading a Core ML tool from GitHub that would allow me to use my Python code to export my pre-trained model as an ML package. I then injected it into this new GitHub project Alex had referred to me, spent a few hours trying to add to this code, and I ran that. Here were my results. Other than seeing how quick the A&E is at processing frame by frame, I realized how the A&E within the M3 is significantly faster compared to the A&E within the M2 chip. To put things into perspective, depending on the algorithm you're trying to run, a difference of 20 runs per second can be vital. Let me give you guys an example. Let's say your object detection model runs on autonomous cars. Well, that, my friends, can be the difference of a car crashing and a car not crashing. Like for a vehicle to be able to adapt to real world scenarios in real time, 20 frames per second or 20 runs per second can be a huge difference. Now imagine analyzing hours and hours and hours of footage. The difference can be significant in the large scale of things. So, is this the best machine for developers? Consider how the M2 MacBook Pro has gotten replaced. After all the trouble I went through trying to test the M3 Pro, I think so, yeah. The old Apple Silicon 13-inch MacBook Pro didn't offer enough for me to recommend it over the new Air. It had the touch bar and the fan as differentiators, but that was about it. This time around, there's so much more than that. Not only an entire new chip, but a whole new body and specs. To purely simplify things, when it comes to strictly testing base models, the M3 Pro is definitely a winner here. Now we can start increasing the budget to maybe add some more RAM into the Air and start playing with specs. I think things could change and get interesting. I do think SSD is as important as RAM, but if I had to choose a component to upgrade, I might just pick the RAM. That's a whole video of it in itself. For now, I'm signing out. Take care, fam. I hope you've enjoyed the video.